Hey, my name is Taylor and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about chronic fatigue syndrome. I've had chronic fatigue syndrome for 4 years now. I got diagnosed 3.5 years ago and it has affected my life in almost every single way possible. If you don't know what chronic fatigue syndrome is, it's a chronic illness, which means it's completely invisible, you can't see it. If you were to look at me, you'd think I was completely fine. And I'm going to talk about the effects of that later on in the video. But the fatigue part, the chronic fatigue, is basically extreme tiredness. It's what it says in the name. It's not a normal tiredness, it is complete shatteredness. I often describe it as it feels like you're laying down and there are a ton of bricks lying on top of you, or that all the gravity in the world is just weighing down on your body. People with chronic fatigue syndrome can't just work through it. It is completely comatosing, or it can be completely comatosing. There are lots of other symptoms as well. I'm going to read some of them off of the NHS website just to make it easier, and although I don't think the NHS website really explains it to the full extent, I do feel like it is a very good starting point if you do want to learn a little bit more about it, so I will link it down below. The first one is sleep problems. Although yes, chronic fatigue syndrome is about being tired all the time, a lot of people still get sleep problems as well, so struggles sleeping at night, struggles getting a good quality of sleep. I often struggle a lot with going to sleep of a night time, which sounds ridiculous because if I'm tired then surely I'll want to sleep and I'll need to sleep, but because I end up doing activity and then having to make up for that by sleeping through the day, more often than not my sleeping pattern will get completely messed up, and it does end up being a bit of a recurring cycle. The next one is muscle and or joint pain. I get a lot of neck ache down the back of my neck, and I'll probably end up talking about that a lot on my channel because it is one of my main symptoms. Then the next one are headaches. That for me often comes hand in hand with the neck pain. I often get the pain down the back of my neck and then it will kind of just like swamp over my head. And sometimes down my back as well, especially if I'm standing around. Problems thinking, remembering or concentrating. This is another massive symptom of mine. I get a lot of brain fog. I often differentiate my tiredness between mental and physical tiredness. So sometimes my body is tired and sometimes my brain is tired. And when my brain is tired, I often feel like my brain is just completely full and I literally can't think of anything else. I have problems remembering things. Sometimes my mum will tell me something and then seconds later I will just have completely forgotten what she told me. And concentrating, when I was in school I struggled concentrating so much. I remember sitting in lessons and I would just completely zone out. And I couldn't explain why, because I'd be really interested in the lessons too, and I literally just could not pay attention to what was going on around me. Feeling dizzy or sick. This was one of the first symptoms I noticed. Every time I stood up, I used to get dizzy and the doctors put it down to blood pressure. But it was only when I started learning more about chronic fatigue syndrome I found out that dizziness is actually a symptom, which completely makes sense because that started when I started getting tired as well. There are a few more on here and there are a ton more that aren't even mentioned, but these are the main ones on there that I struggle with as well. Now, chronic fatigue syndrome affects everyone in different ways, everyone to different extents. Some people get really tired and really shattered, but they can still go about with their days. Some people are the complete opposite. There have been people that have ended up in wheelchairs because of it, and some people have even ended up in hospital because of it. I'm a lot better now than I was, but when I was younger and when I first started getting really ill with it and diagnosed, I used to spend weeks straight just in bed. I'd get up to go and get something to eat, but a lot of the time I would just lie in bed and I couldn't even lift a leg. I'd lie there and just the bottom half of my body felt completely non-existent. And that meant I couldn't go into school. I ended up being off sick for the whole of year 11, which is the last year of secondary school, and I was off sick for the whole of college. I tried going into college. I wanted to go into college. I wanted to go into school. I didn't want to miss out on my education, but my body literally just couldn't do it. But because it's a chronic illness, a lot of people don't know it exists. A lot of people don't believe it exists. I've had an awful time at school and also out of school with people not believing me and people thinking I'm putting it on, people thinking I just don't want to go into school or didn't want to go into school, but that was completely not the case. A lot of doctors don't even believe it exists, which I and everyone who has chronic fatigue syndrome are living proof that it does exist. The fact that people are ending up in hospital and people are ending up in wheelchairs and people are missing out on so much of their lives because their body has no energy, that is proof that it exists. And even out of the people that do know it exists, a lot of people don't understand it. And this often isn't due to any fault of their own. A lot of the time it is just down to lack of education. When I first started getting ill, I didn't know what chronic fatigue syndrome was. I'd never been taught about it at school. I'd never been taught about any chronic illnesses at school. Even my brother's still in school and he has never once come home and said that he's learned about chronic illnesses. Which needs to change, and I think it is completely ridiculous that people aren't being taught about these things because so many people have chronic illnesses. This is something people have to deal with every single day of their lives, and it would be so much easier for people who have got an invisible illness to have learned about it and for other people to have learned about it, because it is just something that there is nowhere near enough awareness around, and that needs to change. And that is why I wanted to make this video. That is why I want to talk about this on my channel. I want to, one, help people who have chronic illnesses, and I'm going to talk about what I'm going to be doing in a minute, but I also want to raise awareness to people who don't have them. Because so many people do. So what I want to do is I want to start making some videos about it on here. I want to talk about what chronic fatigue syndrome is. I want to talk about my experiences. I want to talk about the NHS. I want to talk about schools. I want to talk about some of the things I've learned over the past year. This past year I have improved so much. I'm not better, and this is something I want to make really clear. Just because someone's having good days and just because someone's doing better than they once were, it doesn't mean they don't have chronic fatigue anymore. It doesn't mean they don't have a chronic illness anymore. Chronic fatigue syndrome is something that there isn't a cure for, at least not yet. It is something that I could and will probably have for the rest of my life. It might get better, I might have years when I'm feeling a lot better again, but there isn't a tablet I can take that will completely cure it or make it go away. About a year ago I got transferred to the adult clinic. I was on the children's clinic before until I almost turned 18. The adults clinic, or at least the one near me, is based around support groups. So I went into a support group with a group of people who were going through almost exactly the same thing I was going through. Before, I didn't know anyone who had chronic fatigue syndrome, and just talking to other people who were going through exactly the same thing as me made me feel so much better. And it is honestly the best thing that I have ever done, because although people can sympathise and although people can try and talk to you and make you feel better and be supportive, some of the things that I can't do just because I've got chronic fatigue syndrome feel so stupid sometimes, or they did. But just speaking to other people who are going through similar things to me made me feel so much better, because having a chronic illness can feel lonely. I want to talk about some of the stuff I learned through the adults clinic, because I honestly believe if I was taught some of the stuff I know now when I was 14, 15 instead of when I was 18, I don't think I'd be completely cured right now, because that isn't how it works, but I do think I would have been in a lot better of a position a lot more quickly. the stuff I was being taught in the children's clinic was just completely not right. And I don't want to bash the NHS because it's not the NHS's fault, but the children's clinic was so just built to get kids back into school that it was trying to make you do activities that you didn't even have the energy for, and first you need to learn how to make yourself feel better before you can even think about going into school. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what helps me, as I said, my experiences. I'm also going to be doing some vlogs. I'm in the middle of filming one at the moment, which should be up on Sunday, fingers crossed. I love music, I love rock music, I love going to gigs, I love going to festivals, and something I massively struggled with when I was in school was that going to gigs was like the one hobby I did not give up on when I was ill and when I was in school. It was my one sense of normality, and I used to use it as a massive escape from being ill. And I would literally do anything to get myself to these gigs still. So all people saw was me posting online about gigs and music and being happy. And yes, that was probably stupid to be posting about all of that when I wasn't going into school every day. But what people didn't see was the other side of that. People didn't see me being in bed for weeks. People didn't see the side effects of me going out for a day, and people didn't see what it took for me to even get there in the first place. And what people didn't get was just because I could go to a gig for a few hours every now and again, that doesn't mean I could go into school for even a full day, for 7 hours, let alone a full week. Especially when, as well, school ended up being an environment that I wasn't comfortable in. I wasn't supported by my school at all. The school didn't support me. I had an awful experience with my school. I didn't feel welcome there anymore. So there ended up being tons of anxiety surrounding that as well, which is tiring too. So I want to do some vlogs about living with chronic fatigue syndrome and going out and doing the things I do. I want to be able to just bring C.F.S up like it's anything. I don't want it to be some taboo subject or something to be embarrassed about, because it's not. And I just want to be able to bring it up, to talk about it, to check in. And I want to show that there are two sides to everything. Just because someone looks well, it doesn't mean that they are. And that isn't a bad thing, and it isn't something to be ashamed about. So that is my plan. My first vlog should be going up on Sunday, and then everything else will follow eventually. If you have any questions about chronic fatigue syndrome, then please feel free to ask them either in the comments below, or I'm going to try and set up a Google form or something that will be completely anonymous. So if you want to ask me a question but you want it to be anonymous, I will leave the link in the description below. So that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have chronic fatigue syndrome, then just know that you aren't going to be in this exact same position forever. There are ways to work through it, there are coping mechanisms. Circumstances change, situations change. Just keep going and keep doing what you can do. Remember to let yourself rest. Don't beat yourself up if you need to have a rest day, because that is totally okay. Don't let people make you feel like you can't, because you need to look after your body. And if you don't have chronic fatigue syndrome, you don't have a chronic illness. Just remember that you never know what other people are going through. Just because someone looks like they're well, just because someone looks like they could even be on top of the world, it doesn't mean that there isn't another side to it. It doesn't mean that someone isn't also struggling. It doesn't mean someone doesn't have a chronic illness. And again, if there is, that isn't something to be ashamed about. And if you don't want to talk about it, that's completely okay. But if you do want to talk about it, I want people to feel like they can. I don't want people to be ashamed of being ill, because it doesn't define you. It isn't who you are. It is just something you have to go through. Again, thank you so much for watching. I don't want to plug a load of stuff on this video, but if you want to see some more of my chronic fatigue syndrome stuff, then please subscribe. My social medias will be linked down below. I have started talking about my chronic illness on Instagram as well. But again, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you in my next video.